In my last video, we started off on this topic, so today we're here to finish it. Every NBA team has at least one player who is vital to their success to varying degrees, but in the eyes of the average fan or even the media, they don't necessarily get the proper respect that they deserve, making them a bit underrated. This leads us to the topic of today's video and yesterday's video, where we're going through every single NBA team, identifying the most underrated player in the squad. Last video, we went through the teams in the Eastern Conference, so if you missed that, be sure to go watch it after you watch this one, but that means that today we'll be finishing the list off by going through the teams in the Western Conference. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. Going in alphabetical order, we'll start off with the Dallas Mavericks, and their most underrated player is Jaden Hardy. Hardy might be the biggest steal of the draft last year, and he's been a bit of a hidden gem after being picked in the second round because he hasn't gotten the opportunity to consistently show what he's capable of, but since the trade deadline, he's been getting more incorporated into the team's rotation and has been an exciting spark off of the bench for the offense. In his last 11 games, he's averaging about 16 points on very efficient shooting splits, including 6 games in that span with 20 or more points in them. Next up is the Denver Nuggets, and their most underrated player is Aaron Gordon. The work Aaron Gordon does for this team, specifically defensively, flies pretty under the radar. Offensively, he benefits greatly from the playmaking talent of Nikola Jokic, but defensively, he's the one helping out Jokic hold down the interior with solid rotational awareness, versatile switchability, and the ability to guard multiple positions, which is needed in a lineup with quite a few defensively weak players. Up next, we have the Golden State Warriors, and their most underrated player is Donte Divincenzo. The Warriors have had a lot of ups and downs this year in their attempt to defend their title, and a lot of it is due to the fact that they've dealt with quite a few injuries, and their depth got a bit depleted compared to last season, but Divincenzo was an amazing addition for them and has been a perfect fit with their offense. He's a willing and able sharpshooter, knocking down about 40% of his threes, and he always plays with a ton of effort on defense and crashes the glass well for a guard too. Next up is the Houston Rockets, and their most underrated player is Alperen Sengun. Sengun has been called Baby Jokic by some because even though he hasn't yet come close to reaching Jokic's level of dominance, he does have a very similar play style as a big man with terrific court vision and passing talent that also has a plethora of post moves at his disposal down low that he uses to effectively score in the paint. The one thing holding him back right now is his defense, because otherwise he can be an offensive juggernaut down the line. Next up is the Los Angeles Clippers, and their most underrated player is Terance Mann. The Clippers have a fairly deep roster around Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, but Terance Mann is the jack-of-all-trades type of role player that provides vital impact in big games. He's the one that brings the energy on both ends of the floor, he operates well off the ball, spacing the floor and cutting to the basket, and he doesn't need the ball in his hands to impact games in a positive way. Up next is the Los Angeles Lakers, and their most underrated player is Austin Reaves. Reaves has been thrust into several different roles over the course of the season this year, and he's been able to thrive in pretty much all of them. Early on, he was in their sixth man role, spotting up and taking a lot of threes. He's been needed for defensive purposes in some lineups, and lately, with the multitude of injuries the Lakers have been dealing with, he's been needed to be a go-to scoring threat some games on offense, and he responded to that by dropping 20 or more points in 3 of 4 games in that stretch, so he's looking like the kind of young player that's just going to keep getting better and better. Next up is the Memphis Grizzlies, and their most underrated player is Tyus Jones. A lot of the talk surrounding the Grizzlies has tended to be about Ja Morant both on and off the court, or Dillon Brooks and his trash-talking shenanigans, but on the court, Tyus Jones is as good of a backup point guard as it gets. When he's needed to fill in and start games, he regularly drops 20 points, he dishes out a ton of assists, making the right reads, setting his guys up for good looks, and he's just a very fundamentally sound, smart player. Next up is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and their most underrated player is Jaden McDaniels. Anthony Edwards is the team's go-to scorer, Karl Anthony Towns is coming back from his injury ready to provide dynamic scoring as well, and Gobert holds things down inside defensively, but McDaniels is the connecting piece in the lineup that does all the little things to help a team succeed, and he's doing it while he also emerges as much more than just a 3-and-D wing player. He's one of the best defensive players in the whole NBA, he efficiently is starting to knock down his threes, and the rate at which his ability to create off the dribble has been improving could see him in the running for the Most Improved Player award by next season. Next up is the New Orleans Pelicans, and their most underrated player is Herb Jones. Again, Jones is another example of being a player getting outshined by the bigger names around him like Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and CJ McCollum, but Herb's role defending the opposing team's best player is crucial. He's a long, quick athlete that uses his length to pester whoever he's guarding and cause havoc, and as his jumper continues to develop, he's going to be one of the better two-way wings in no time. Up next, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, and their most underrated player is Jalen Williams. The Thunder actually, funnily enough, have two rookies with this same name, so don't confuse the two, but the one that I'm referring to is the wing player that has really been emerging in a big way in the second half of the season, blossoming into a dominant two-way wing player that uses his strong frame and natural feel for the game to create for himself and others on his way to dropping 20 or more points in 13 of his last 22 games. Up next is the Phoenix Suns, and their most underrated player is Josh Okogie. When the Suns traded away Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson in the deal that landed them Kevin Durant, the worry was that the team sacrificed too much of their perimeter defense for it, and Okogie has actually stepped into a bigger role after that and has plugged those holes perfectly. So even though he's not a flashy player that will get much of the focus on this star-studded team, he's been a key contributor in that regard. Up next is the Portland Trail Blazers, and their most underrated player is Jerami Grant. The Blazers' season finished in a way that is as disappointing as it gets, not even being able to fight for a spot in the play-in tournament, so unfortunately, that overshadowed Grant having his best season as a pro, where he scored about 21 points per game, shooting the ball more efficiently inside and out than he ever has in his career. Next up is the Sacramento Kings, and their most underrated player is Domantas Sabonis. When the Kings traded for Sabonis last year, the team came under heavy fire for it, and I'll admit, I was one of the skeptics as well. But with the Kings in second place in the West, looking like as good of an offensive team as we've seen in recent history, he's proved a lot of people wrong, and his production in terms of scoring, rebounding, and even passing as a big man is only being surpassed by the MVP candidates this year. Up next is the San Antonio Spurs, and their most underrated player is Devin Vassell. The Spurs are a young, rebuilding group looking to develop their next generation, and quietly leading the way for them is Devin Vassell. He was drafted in the lottery, expected to be a reliable 3-and-D talent, but is already so much more than that in his third season. He's still a very good perimeter defender, who efficiently knocks down his threes on a high volume of attempts, but he has also taken huge strides forward as a creator off the dribble, which has taken his game to another level. And finally, the last team in the West is the Utah Jazz, and their most underrated player is Walker Kessler. The Jazz traded away Rudy Gobert for a package that included a ton of draft picks, which alone would have made the trade worthwhile, but they also acquired Kessler in that trade, who is already showing signs of being capable of being a quality Rudy Gobert replacement. He's amongst the league leaders in blocks already as a rookie, despite playing only 22 minutes per game. He's shooting a league-leading 72% from the field, and he's also an outstanding rebounder. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below which players you think are pretty underrated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.